new ones. I think most of you are familiar with them as well, but if we could do very quick introductions anyhow, that would be great. Maybe if we start with you. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Will Stevenson. I'm Commercial Director for Ensure Subsea. We are an EPCI cable installation contractor and a trenching subcontractor. We also have a parent company based in the Middle East who have the cable repair framework agreement for Aramco. So there we're looking after 2,500 kilometers of cable with a repair time of 42 days.
And I'm Henrik, and I've been working with cable protection systems for quite a long time, with cables quite a long time, and now I work with some stabilization solution with this Portons solution, which is a new startup company.
Yeah, and Mike McLaughlin, I'm the MWS project director for Europe and UK from ABL, used to be called LOC, London Offshore Consultants. I've been involved with marine warranty, particularly for cables, for about the last 16 years or so. I've been involved in many cable repairs as well.
And René, we know you want to.
I want to make one small remark. Although my own company is called Capability, I think that on this panel, I am more representing one of my clients, which is Wind Cable Services, a logistical company doing handling and transport and storage, short-term and long-term of cables.
Good. And Jack, we just heard from you, so we know who you are. But regardless, maybe to set the stage and clean up what we're discussing a little bit and frame it, I thought we spoke a lot about repairs of export cables, but we also heard the question: are we mixing export with array? Is there a difference in failure rates, etc.? So, Jack, you showed us, you told us a lot about repairs. Can you tell us how to distinguish what's the main differences between fixing an export cable and fixing an array cable?
The philosophy of a repair is the same. The only thing is the older array cables are relatively short, so quite often it's quicker and cheaper to replace them rather than to repair them. With the voltage growing, with the length of some of the inter-array cables growing, you come to the same as an export cable, where you're probably better off in some cases to put a joint in rather than replace the whole cable. But it's depending on the location, the lengths, the way the cable has been protected, and let's face it, 90% of the inter-array cable being repaired or replaced has to do with CPS issues.
I think there we come to a sensitive point that we have some experts on the panel to touch on. But exactly, when the repairs we see, we know we will have to deal with them. We know there is diverging opinions on why cables fail. But since in the panel we should be discussing improving reliability and avoiding downtime, I thought maybe we can go through a life cycle of an asset from ideation to end of life. What can we do at each stage to make it better than it is today? Let's leave the discussion whether it's good or bad, or sufficient or insufficient. But we know cables will fail, like we mentioned many times, and we need to improve it. So, René, you want to say something?
I can comment a little bit on it, because we were talking about frame agreements for repairs, etc. We heard a lot of things about having spares in stock, etc., as well. What you see a little bit happening is that some of the developers and owners of wind farms and interconnectors keep their own spares in a separate stock. And I've heard stories today and yesterday that people were trying to find a spare and nobody knew where it was anymore. So, and one of the things is, and that's one of the good things I think with Wind Cable Services, is that they have frame agreements with a number of wind farm owners, including Ørsted, for instance, worldwide, but also for Europe. And they have all spare cables, export as well as inter-array cables on one location, together with a warehouse in which you have all the necessary cable accessories available and they know where they are. Because the warehouse is not that big that they don't know have a good management system for that one. And that means that if there is a repair ongoing, it's just waiting till the repair vessel is coming alongside the yard and they make sure everything is on the quayside and it's been loaded immediately. And I think that it's a way forward for many of the developers to have at least sufficient stock in place. And if we can go to universal joints, as you were saying, making a lot of the spares more universal, it will help everyone.
Yeah, I thought that particularly the slide presented earlier by NKT was particularly important because everyone is moving towards the idea of standardization and the ability to interface with different products and cables. Because you're right, Renee, Ørsted have been most forward thinking the way that they've taken that forwards. It was only 4 or 5 years ago, I think they really collated that agreement. But I think they're now at a point where they should be moving the next step to basically taking complete charge of the repair operation as well, and having agreements with other developers to be able to pull in whichever cable vessels are available on the market to be able to pull straight into a project because they're already close by mobilized.
And then we're talking about the maintenance agreements as we know from the telecom industry. I agree, yeah.
And maybe a question to that: is there the appetite there? Because, like I say, I mentioned to Jack that there was vessels on standby. There have been attempts to recreate the telecom setup, and somehow they ran out of money. And I don't know whether that is because the business model didn't come out the way it was expected, or whether it got under pressure for other reasons, or whether and that's what I heard sometimes is, yeah, but that's only one vessel. What's when it's gone for a repair for another customer? Then I don't have one anyway. And I'm thinking, yeah, great, but now you have 0 vessels. So every repair that happens here in that situation. So is the appetite there now to start moving in a direction like this?
I think that one of the things that is not really vessel based, but is that it has been very EPCI driven. Who's gonna prepare what kind of preparations? I mean, we heard that from various presentations, at least Jack's, but also others. Axles, that preparation is, of course, vital, instrumental in doing this. And obviously, if you ask EPCI, most EPCI directors, they have, the problem happens in somebody else's project. And I think that the focus is that what we're talking about, repair, is not so much what happens during the actual installation of the wind park. It's not. I'm not saying that cable failures doesn't happen during installation of wind park, but what I'm saying is you really have to turn that to an O&M and kind of vision, which is, I believe, which is also what Jack and is saying. If you're gonna have a standby or some kind of vessel that is available, it's an O&M thing. It's not EPCI, and EPCI is not willing to pay for anything that's not, after the absolute minimum turning it on. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the appetite may be starting to grow for it. It was proposed a few years ago, around about the same time as the first universal joint came out. And also there was a couple of other initiatives that were starting up then. But actually the vessel that was proposed wasn't suitable anyway, but that's another story. But to be honest, I don't think there is a vessel that could be available for that role at the moment, because what I'm seeing on more and more projects is overstretch, where one project gets slightly delayed, and that's got a knock-on effect for the next project when the vessel is already late, which then has a knock-on effect to the project after that. And I do worry that some of these vessels are being so overworked that that the maintenance isn't as it should be, and that sort of thing. So that's one of the things that we do keep an eye on.
It's also about having the right tool for the job. I mean, Jack, the vessel that that you propose there is very fit for purpose for a lot of the repair operations. So the fact that you're upgrading into DP2, I think, is an excellent idea. But the shallow water aspect is also a massive consideration, which, you know, is a real challenge on some of these export cables. And you're looking at some of these new projects where they're actually having to make landfall in more challenging locations compared with the easy wins of easy offshore wind, which had small export cables and soft ground conditions. Now moving into areas where you've got long 4, 8, 10 kilometers with less than 10-meter water depth. Then your repair is going to start to also shoot up in cost, and the availability of the vessels is going to be in even more of a squeeze for those larger projects.
Jack, I saw you raising the microphone before, so
Yeah, okay. I think the ACMA model has worked very well for the telecom. But I think the what is critical is that the market has changed dramatically over the last 12 months. And that's the supply chain is really in distress now. There's a shortage just about everything. So if there is a vessel now for these kind of repairs, I think that's key. Of course, it takes somebody to make the investment. It takes somebody to take the first step. There's no security in life, or not many anyway. So I think it's a step forward, and we believe this is the way to go if you want to be a dedicated cable repair company.
I think the ACMA works well for the telecoms company, but it's a slightly different scenario where they have got standardization. A repair under the ACMA generally takes about 10 days. The engineering is already done, but if they do any, and they've got the benefit of having the ability to divert all the data generally through somebody else's cable. Okay, they have to pay for that, but it's not like an export cable or an interconnector or even an array cable where you know, if you have a failure, you definitely get a loss of revenue.
so it sounds like that there is some parallels from the telecom industry that we can draw. There are a couple decades ahead of us. They have meshed systems. They have ridiculous amounts of cable. But do you feel that the power cable industry is moving in that, or will we get there someday? Because we started talking about more meshed systems, the multi-purpose interconnectors. We started talking, you know, adaptive universal components, vessels on standby. Sounds like we're starting to build all those elements. It's just will not have a big revolution suddenly. It's all those pieces fitting together. Do you see that happening, or do you think that the complexity is so different that we will not be able to make that happen? Like,
I'm not sure. Well, I think as we get more and more cables, I think attitudes may well change, but I think part of the problem towards standardization, if you'll forgive me, is the cable manufacturers and their reluctance to share data and things like that. I'll give you a good example. We're doing a cable joint on a export cable at the moment, and the MWS isn't allowed into the jointing shack because it's secret, apparently.
Yep.
Not NKT, but
I would know otherwise. You don't need to tell me. Yeah, good. But it sounds like we're all talking a lot about how to deal with the worst case scenario. It's already something failed, and now we're dealing with it. And how do you make the best out of a let's say suboptimal situation? But is there things we can do in advance? We talked about trenching, burial, installation. Have the faults are internal during production already you know, caused? Is it's design issues? What do we need to do before so we don't have those situations in the first place?
Well, I think we actually have more of those situations in the future in front of us. I know I'm possibly one of the pessimists in this business, and of course not so much. I know you're smiling all the time because you know I'm speaking very much around inter-array cables more than interconnectors, but also for export cable. And I believe that we will see a higher number of failures in the future not just because we have more cables out, but also because the typical wind park cable today is probably about 6 years old or something like this. And we have estimated these are going to last for about 32 years. We have all agreed that there are nice analysts out there telling that they should work fine for those 32 years with a safety factor of 10. Now we have a lot of failures, and what should stop these failures from occurring at a higher numbers in the next 6 years and ongoing?
I think maybe to pick up on a couple of themes that have come out yesterday and today, Jonathan, when he was talking about risk to the offshore wind farms and to the developers, was talking about, you know, you get what you pay for, and this real huge cost reduction push that's gone through offshore wind, driving the cost down, whilst also simultaneously pushing for growth of larger turbines, which pushes the technology of inter-array cables and export cables, and everyone's bringing out newer equipment, faster cables, larger cables. And there needs to be something here about investment and paying up front to have the best quality manufacturing, quality control, testing, and also cost on installation. Spend more on the installation to ensure that you're going above and beyond the predicted safety precautions to ensure that you're paying for the best possible protection for the cables. I think we had an interesting comment before about getting people to stay at depth during reasonable endeavors. You know, this is the sort of thing about, well, where are the economic drivers here between forcing down installation contractors? Okay, I might be biased on this one. Installation contractors forcing a lump sum where we have to spend every minute correcting for reasonable endeavors, versus actually having a proper conversation where actually there's a bit more collaboration with the client, driving value in the long term, where we do spend more on the installation to ensure that we protect the cables longer for better.
And where does that come from, do you feel? That you're facing requirements that don't seem to make sense, and then you're forced to do them even though you know it's not economically optimal. And it sounds like the decision has been made 3 steps away in a bank in front of a computer that read somewhere that 0.8 meters is not enough, and now you need to do 1.
One of the things which you saw happening throughout the last round about 15 years is that when there was a switch over from telecoms to power cables in wind farms, initially reasonable endeavor was fully accepted. And then, in my point of view, a lot of consultants came in as well and came up with complete different stories, etc., etc., etc. And due to the high competition, I've seen it myself on projects, is that at a certain moment you were forced as a contractor to keep your vessels readily available and working. You were forced to take on complete 100% weather downtime, whatever the weather was, not a P50, but complete weather downtime and full burial risk. So no seabed conditions anymore for reasonable endeavor. No, if it's 2 meters, and the requirements, especially for inter-array cables, if you look at, for instance, the Hornsea project, the Hornsea project for Ørsted, they were asking for 2.5 meters burial. Inter-array cables, why? There's no reason to do it, but they insisted you have to bury at 2.5 meters. That's a risk to the cable anyhow. It's not only the installation, but during the burial, you provide additional risk to the cable, and there is no reason why.
And how can we alleviate that? Because I can see how the problem happens, right? We just heard we make models so that things last 10,000 years. We get under pressure. We need to save on rock installation around the CPS, and then everything fails anyway.
Not with the rocks, eh?
No, but we say, but then we've buried the cable so it breaks once in a million years, and then we had to save money somewhere else to make it economically viable, and then the thing falls apart after 2 anyway. So how do we avoid this? How do we make sure that when we spend money, we spend it in the right place?
Having a good conversation between the clients and the contractors, and not a one-way pointing out, this is what you should do. But then I'm coming from a contractor side, so I'm biased as well.
I think one of the issues with that actually is, as more and more wind farms being developed and the business is expanding, the depth of knowledge and experience is diminishing, and you get people in some of the developers where you can go into the project team, and nobody has got any experience in that operation, that type of operation previously, and to go back to Rene's array cable burial, it's having a good CBRA, but also understanding it. And if with reasonable endeavors, it's still not at target burial depth, then revisit the CBRA to see if it's still a risk. I've known a cable, I shan't name any names, where the cable was laid with some residual tension. They buried it with the trencher first of all because it was fairly hard ground, got it down so far, then they tried another burial tool and it didn't go any deeper. In fact, it got a bit shallower because it was a jetting trencher. And then they decided, well, let's try some CFE, see if that does anything. If you're not going to get it down with a cutting tool in the first place with the depressor, CFE, all that's going to do is blow even more sand away and leave it more exposed. But sometimes people don't listen or understand.
But is that something that we can improve? Because we see what's ahead of us. We're pushing a giant wave of projects, and the peak of that is not in sight. The know-how that we have today is going to be diluted more and more over more and more projects. That's why I pushed back when we said you have to require that your jointers have 5-year experience. How? The 220 kV AC export cables, we didn't make those 5 years ago. How can you have experience in something like this?
Can I comment on that one? I'm an old guy, and I started around 81. I started working, and within 3 weeks after I signed my contract, I was sent abroad to work on the projects. I worked around about 10 years on various projects. You learn so much offshore in that kind of dredging, but in the end, you can suppose it's the same for offshore wind or whatever. Nowadays, there are so many people coming from the university going to sit in certain roles and telling everyone what we should do. There is no experience. You only can get the experience when you go out, not out behind the computer. And that's what's happening too much. And they are the guys, those are the persons who are telling us what to do.
But I think on that as well, Rene, is also the knowledge capability of the people acting on behalf of the insurers in the repair scenario. We were talking about having experienced MWSs on the panel, which is wonderful, but there are certain projects out there where the MWS on the back of the vessel isn't suitably experienced to be able to qualify whether that particular operation is correct, whether that be they don't understand the jointing or they're not allowed into the shack, or whether it's that they've never seen a transpooling operation. And so this isn't the same as in a traditional MWS role in shipping, where it's a more standardized mechanism for the operation. Here, each individual project will have different things that we need to have experience on. So I think we also need to really make sure that the MWS appointment at the beginning is done with the correct CVs for the individual tasks, and they change during the project. Mechanical gutting is different to jetting, is different to jointing, is different to cable transport, and it should have the right people throughout the project.
I can only agree. And in fact, it's an issue that we are suffering from in some ways, because, as with anything, the rates are, everything appears to be all the contracts are driving the price down for MWS, and if you want the experienced guy, you've got to pay for him, and a lot of our experienced guys come from either an MWS ideally should be either master mariner or a chief engineer, or somebody experienced with those operations from say in the case of cables, from a cable installer, but they can earn far more money being a cable installer than being an MWS. Yet everybody expects the MWS to be the expert, which in some cases they're not. But what we do is we ensure if we have to send somebody that's not as experienced as we'd like, then we make sure that they have a lot of back cover from the back office, from the likes of myself and my colleagues. And of course, that comes at a price as well, as my wife will tell you. You know, phone calls in the middle of the night and that sort of things. But actually what we are doing at ABL is we're in the process of developing our own training programs. And we've always ensured that, you know, people, the youngsters that join us particularly, that don't have a lot of offshore experience, when they do go offshore, wherever possible, they're supervised, you know, and shadowed. But also we make sure that they do like a task book where they've got certain operations they need to witness and all that sort of thing. And of course, there's SOMS as well, which helps, which is the Society of Marine Warranty Surveyors. And there's certain criteria that you have to meet to become registered with SOMS, and I'm on one of the screening panels, and I have to say that I probably reject at least 50% of the applications I see.
Yes, please.
I think as an industry, over the last 10, 15 years, we have failed to attract sufficient new people. And as a result, I think the maturing of the business has suffered from that. Now, there's two ways to resolve that. One is that the business case of our clients is not feasible anymore. And then we get back to the competition. Or we start as a government, or from a government perspective, investing in those people and trying to make the industry more attractive. But one way or the other, there is a shortage of people, and it's MWS, it's engineers, it's jointers. I think any company sitting here is looking for more people, and they're just not there. And as a result, we can people into the industry with massive skill gaps or massive competence lack. So it's not easy to resolve, I would say.
Yeah.
I was last week. I was on a meeting in Holland in which there was a government guy from the government together with a guy from Blix Consultancy, and they were highlighting all the plans for the offshore wind farms in the Netherlands, which was 20 gigawatt by 2030, and then going up to 70 gigawatt in 2050. And oh, it's very beautiful. It's looking very good. So I put up my hand and I just asked, okay, guys, I like your plans a lot, but please tell me one thing. How are we going to realize it at the moment with a gap in the supply chain? The supply chain can't manage. There are not enough vessels available to do everything, and we have a huge lack of personnel. I was quite flabbergasted by the answer, because like we have, the politics should do something about it. They said, it's not a political issue. It's for the market to solve. Come on, how can you realize plans if you don't assist the market in this respect?
And do you see this changing now with, you know, basically the last couple of years, maybe even decades, there were very few companies making money in this industry, the subcontractors, the suppliers, were bankruptcies, acquisitions, mergers, vessels shifting hands, people being laid off. No one seemed to have any kind of money spare to invest into the future, be that on know-how, on capabilities. Do you see that changing now, or?
I had a story yesterday, and I'm definitely saying I'm not quite sure if it's true, but somebody told me yesterday that Ørsted is going to lay off 800 people. I said that's very good, because now finally all the people that stole away from the industry might come back, and those were the experienced guys. They went for a higher pay to the various developers, and if they can come back into the industry, please. I'm not saying it's sure it's true. I'm not. I don't know.
I'm not sure whether that's good for Ørsted or whether that's good for the industry, but
Good for them. Bad for Ørsted.
It would be, well, let's not hypothesize, but essentially those are still the same people. We, you know, they're needed there and they're needed here and they're needed everywhere else. I think the big risk is how do we get people from other industries excited about ours?
But I believe one thing that happens is, of course, that we and the panel here is a good. I'm not the youngest in this panel, but you can see the problem in this panel.
I was about to say, you may not be the youngest, but you're probably not the oldest either.
You can see the problem here, and obviously we have to support that. We are actually there, and we help support people. And I supported some of the people from Delft University that was interested in this, and now we actually see people that are interested in this, that do believe in that. Yes, maybe offshore wind is good, because I was born in Denmark, but I moved to Norway, and everybody in Norway were dreaming about getting into what is now Equinor. So everybody wanted, that was all they were hoping for. Now we actually have people who actually think that they want to be in this industry, and I think yes, we have to actually facilitate. All companies have to facilitate all people who are working in the industry with some kind of baggage, and here there's quite a lot of luggage in these 5 seats here, and you're closing in as well. At least Axel is there. So where we can actually help new people.
Yeah, can we get a microphone there for a second? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, yeah, sorry, Matt from Red Penguin. I'm fascinated. So I'll say the same thing I said to the telecoms industry this time last year, which is that we have an 18-man company, 18-person company, 50%, in fact, no, now more than 50% are female, and a third are under 28. If we can do it, then you can all do it, but you have to get up and go and do it. We've used apprenticeships. We've actively recruited from universities, and yeah, fine, it's hit and miss. Even as recently as this week, one of my team has been poached by the marine industry, not the subsea cable sector, but he's going to a job which is going to double his salary. I'm delighted for him, if I am slightly gutted. But the plus of that is that the person that's going to replace him is a 24-year-old female graduate engineer who joined us 18 months ago. And she's already developed the capability and the ability. They're out there and they really, really, really enjoy the industry. They love going to sea if you give them the opportunity. I mean, all of my lot fight to go to sea. They've been on telecoms cable repairs, power cable repairs, survey. Although apparently survey in October in the North Sea is not their favorite place to be. What I'm trying to say is that the opportunities are there. You just got to go and get them. But you have to go and get them. The problem is they can't come to you. What I will say in the UK certainly is that the free ports are quite useful. So we're Solent free ports in terms of Southampton's sort of locale. And I know that in the west of England, I think it's Plymouth and Devon free ports are working very closely with the government to promote Maritime UK specifically. And we've leveraged that. It's been quite hard work. There's an awful lot of forms to fill in. But the opportunities are there. But I echo it. I mean, I did laugh in the telecoms world when I joined Red Penguin at 49 years old. I was viewed as young. I thought it was wonderful. And actually, I would say that the profile across this sector on this half of it, i.e. power and sort of export cables, floating wind and interconnectors, actually, whilst you look around the room and there are a number of us who are very experienced, you're probably in a better position overall than the telecom sector. They are having to work quite hard to capture. They've got a lot of youth in there, but very, very little experience. And the problem with telecoms is that actually it's even easier to sit behind a computer and be the kid behind the computer. At least in this sector, it's a little bit more hands-on. It's a good discussion, though. It's very worthwhile.
Yeah, I think it might also vary also by region. I know from my experience trying to hire people, hiring a technical expert for onshore, I have headhunters looking for someone in Berlin that speaks German, and I've been looking for 6 months. This is the prime requirement is someone with an electrical or mechanical engineering background that speaks German in Berlin. 6 months, headhunters are looking.
I can tell you that within Van Oort, the electrical engineers, none of them are Dutch. I think there's only one Dutch, and the rest is coming from the Mediterranean, from Spain, from Portugal, from Greece.
Yeah.
None of them speaks Dutch.
Yeah, this example is more specific because it's for the local industry, but regardless, I really struggle from personal experience finding people that want to join. And I think what you mentioned, Equinor, wanting to join this industry. So I imagine also companies like us that do have a name, and it's starting to or it's becoming a criterion for new joiners. I want to work in renewables. I want to make the world a better place. There would be some aversion from some of the companies that they were drawn to before, but I don't see the huge impact yet, and the growth we have ahead of us is enormous. Yeah, good. But so that's people. What can we do about the technologies? And I was thinking, we saw the discussion around dynamic cables or floating wind. We seem to all be taking a step back now. No, let's focus on the static and not lean too far out the window. But should we also start looking at, well, we've done now 220 kV, is that enough? Or should we be still pushing the envelope and, we will be meeting in 5 years and the surprising next array cable voltage is going to be 220 and the export cables will be 400 or more? Or should we start sticking to what we know how to do and just do it in large quantities?
Well, I hinted to Axel yesterday, that possibly going after that, we are trying to project the future with what we have known from the past, and not always be the most successful way of doing something new. And I, like you, was a short time in a heavy lift company, and obviously one of the big problems there is that you have this striving between large enough turbine and getting standardization and something. And I don't think that you can stop the race for the bigger turbines. I think, though, that you can also not ignore the fact that if you, every 3 or 4 years, you're going to have a new something that you will never be able to catch up. And we will have said in the same discussion, hopefully not us, but somebody that's young now will in 15 years sit here and be in the same discussion and say, where do we find people that have 5 years experience in the technology that we have now?
Yeah, we have seen it, of course, during the last couple of years already, when I think it's less than 10 years ago that at a certain moment they were developing 10 megawatt turbines, and the whole development was stopped because it was never ever going to happen. They were going to 5, 6, and that was the maximum. The first 6 megawatt went into the water, and then they were talking about 8, stepping up to 9, 10. Now we're talking about 30. I think we should have a standard for 15 for a couple of years for the market to pick up. But we've seen it with cables as well. It's at a certain moment it was 33, and then slowly the discussion became 66, and within 2 years we had 66. And if you look at the interconnector market with the DC cables, TenneT put on a large tender for the 525 kV export cables. They're there now. When did they start? Consultations were 3, 4, 5 years ago, but that was mainly from the installation side. But they decided already which way they wanted to go, and it was developed by most of the cable manufacturers, I think, within a year or 2 years, including the testing, and there were compliant systems. So it can go very fast if people want it. If the industry wants it, it can go very fast.
Yeah. And that brings me back to the array cables that we mentioned. if we do those things this quickly, is exactly the example of array cables, switch from 33 to 66 went very fast. Before the first 66 kV array cables were in the sea, all the new wind farms were already being planned with 110 or 132 before we even had experience with 66. At that pace, will we be able to avoid all mistakes like with the cable protection system, or do we just have to accept that once in a while something will go wrong and then deal with it?
Honestly, I don't think that the change to 66 kV have increased the number of failures in interarray cables.
Just an example of how quickly the change has been moving.
But obviously, yes, if you go very quickly, and you know that you come from the cable industry, so you know the difference between a medium voltage 66 kV cable and a 132 kV cable. There are a few issues there that is a little bit different.
Opportunities.
and that's of course one of the things we will see in so the thing is, are people willing to pay for having it sufficiently tested before it's actually being installed?
Jack, I see you also you have something to say.
Yeah, I don't know really how to phrase it because I think it's a maturing market and mistakes are being made. But at the end of the day, as contractors and also as cable manufacturers, we're fairly opportunistic. Nobody made us step into this market. We do this voluntarily, and we voluntarily lose money for quite a few years now. So eventually that will change. And if we don't mature, if we don't get better in our game, and in all fairness, we're not getting very much better the last few years, then projects become not viable anymore, or insurance premiums become so high, or projects become uninsurable that it will change automatically. So it's really, we can say here and say it's up to the government, it's up to people, it's up to, but as contractors, as people in this industry, we are the only one that can change it. So that's basically my message.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe one more question on all the analyses that we've done is I keep looking at it and I think of the presentation that Chas gave about the friction. I just cannot let it go. Are we not over engineering some things? Because I've said it to a few people. I know when the first transatlantic cable was laid, the decision or the idea came in the 50s, and then it was implemented in the 60s. It was a cross-Atlantic cable, and it's 1850 and 1860. So they've managed to do it in 10 years, and I doubt they knew the water depth, let alone what the size and shape of boulders on the seabed is. And it worked. How come we put this much effort and we're still not confident it's done right, or we find still the same number of potential challenges and things still fail and we still make mistakes?
Because I think we lost common sense somewhere along the line. We've basically probably focused on the wrong elements. Let's face it, installation-wise, a lot of things go right. Design-wise, a lot of things go wrong. So maybe we focused on the wrong elements in project.
When you say design-wise, what do you mean?
Engineering-wise, I think.
Okay.
And I was going to suggest analysis again, because some people say, well, you can analyze anything, so that we can basically, and as one of the experienced guys in an O&M department in a small Danish wind farm developer responded, well, if that was correct, I would be out of work.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think, as you say, lost common sense is may be correct, but also this thing that I believe that some people actually do believe, with possibly with more or less inside knowledge believe that they can actually project with analysis what is going to happen and what is not going to happen. And they forget about that the model they set up, the assumptions they make in the work, that the result that comes out on the computer is just as dependent on those assumptions and those models that they set up as at the actual, you know, where they can go in as well. I can prove here that 2 and 2 is a finite number.
Good. So do we have any final comments? Because I see I get a red screen already. Or comments from the audience, you're welcome as well. No. Okay, but then I would say we can continue outside in a less formal setting and wrap the panel discussion up here. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.